Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name is James Copley and today I am joined by Joe Donnohue from the Yorkshire Evening Post. We're going to be discussing Sunderland's trip to Elland Road on Monday night. Joe, welcome to the pod and how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, James. Doing all right, yeah. Leeds top of the table currently, obviously being tailed by Sunderland and the others, but looking forward to the game on Monday night.
Absolutely. We'll start with current affairs actually because you've just come away from Daniel Farke's press conference. What's the news? How is he? What spirits is he in? And what should we expect from Leeds United on Monday?
Yeah, Farke in press conferences tends to remain very much on an even keel. He's never too high, never too low. If you suggest that his team are playing well, he'll come up with a critique for how they can play better, and vice versa. If there's an individual who's maybe underperforming, he'll defend them. It's kind of much of a muchness today. The only real revelation is that Max Wöber and Patrick Bamford won't be involved on Monday night. Wöber's just had knee surgery. So he's out for 6 weeks, and Bamford's had a little bit of a setback in his rehab from a hamstring injury. But apart from that, it's a pretty much fully fit squad. And you'd have to say that on current form, or over the course of this season, neither Wöber or Bamford would be in that starting 11 or the strongest 11. So it's a strong group.
I was going to ask about Bamford actually because I don't want to disrespect him, but he seems to have had a little bit of a fall from grace in terms of first team opportunities at Leeds United. Obviously, historically at Leeds over the past, 4 or 5 years, he's been such an important player. How's that sort of transition been for Bamford away from the first team?
Yeah, I mean, this season he's played next to no minutes. He was, out of favour. Joe Piroe and Matteo Joseph were favoured to him at the beginning of the season. He's then had injuries, which has kind of been a real subplot to his Leeds career. When he has played and had rhythm and continuity, he's been very important. But that's been those sorts of times have been too few and far between. So there hasn't been a feeling that you can rely on him this season, and not that they've needed him. He's obviously very useful to have when he does have that rhythm. He showed that at the midpoint of last season, came into the team around January, February time, and I think scored 7 or 8 in 10 games. So kind of just turning the clock back there. But yeah, this year it's been difficult for him.
And talk to me about Joe Piroe actually, because he doesn't miss any games, does he really? And I think he's on 20 goal contributions for the season, 14 goals and 6 assists. A really, really impressive player.
Yeah, I mean, availability is the most important commodity for a footballer. And Piroe just he maintains that base level of fitness. He's always ready to be called upon, even when at the beginning of the season when he wasn't first choice. He was just biding his time, and yeah, he's now got like 14 goals, 6 assists, got a goal and assist in midweek at Watford, and sort of has this quality where he can kind of come across very sort of nonchalant on the pitch, and maybe has more of a languid style, which has in the past when he hasn't been scoring, maybe hasn't gone down too well with the fans. But you can't really argue with the numbers that he's put up. Even when he was at Swansea, I think this is the 4th season in a row in the Championship where he's put up double figures for goals alone. Never mind the contributions that he gets with assists as well. Yeah, he's a real useful player that I think any Championship manager would be blessed to have. Daniel Farke has obviously come to his defence numerous times in the past when he maybe hasn't been as effective. But again, 20 goal contributions over the course of 32 games so far. It's not really that much to argue with. Links the play quite nicely. But I think that the main thing about Piroe is if you give him a chance, he is more often than not gonna hit the target. And if he's hitting the target, he's hitting the corners. So yeah, I think that's kind of the message to the Sunderland defenders would be: don't give Piroe that time and space to get through one-on-one.
No, absolutely. And just taking it back a little bit to today's press conference, how do you find Daniel Farke generally? Because I've been in a couple of his presses after Sunderland games, and he comes across as very knowledgeable, very open, very honest. How do you find him?
Yeah, I think I'd say pretty much all of the journalists in the Leeds press pack get along with him quite amicably. As I say, he always kind of remains on an even keel. Even if he feels hard done by referees, or he feels like his team have deserved more from the game, or he feels let down by his players or whatever, he rarely sort of hangs people out to dry. He'll always try and look at things with a sort of an objective viewpoint. I think he is quite open and transparent, apart from the things which he definitely doesn't want to talk about, which, given that we've just had January transfers, I can honestly not count the number of times he's replied to a question about, transfer links with, well, we'll not talk about business until it's completed, or I won't comment on players who aren't contracted to Leeds. So that kind of rules out those opportunities when you want to maybe just get a little bit of insight from him on a potential transfer target. But apart from that, he's a good talker, comes across really well. And while he might not be, previous, not right now, because I mean, he's pretty much man of the moment given they're 14 games unbeaten. But, previously there've been fans who've maybe not really bought into it, maybe not drank the Farke Kool-Aid. But I mean, he doesn't let that bother him. He's very much, stays pretty even.
I was going to ask about that very matter actually, in terms of Farke's career arc at Leeds United, especially after last season's disappointment. And it always feels from an outsider's perspective of Leeds United is that there's a bit of a Marcelo Bielsa spectre haunting the managers, in terms of he was such a cult figure. He did so much for Leeds United, got them out of the Championship, playing this amazing brand of football, and they competed in the Premier League as well after that. What has been fans' reaction to Daniel Farke, particularly after last season's disappointment as well, where Leeds did so well in terms of points return, but there were just two other teams who did better than them, and I felt that was harsh on Leeds as well, actually.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers from the back end of last season, I think it's literally just Sunderland and Leeds who've accrued 90 points in a second tier season and not gone up, either through the playoffs or automatically. So it was a real anomaly. But there were a number of people who were saying, well, look, how has he not been able to get this team promoted automatically when you have your likes of Jorginho Rutter, Crescencio Somerville, Archie Gray, Glenn Kamara, all of whom left in the summer. But there was maybe a little bit of skepticism that Farke was the right man at the beginning of this season, because Leeds were still kind of getting up to speed with a newish squad. There were fresh faces in there, but I think we've definitely seen that he's absolutely the right man for the team right now. He hasn't full stop. He hasn't had a crack at the Premier League. So if Leeds were to go up, then I feel like the record would be wiped clean. But certainly for the Championship, he's done it twice before with Norwich. He came extremely close last year with Leeds. He's managed to mitigate for the absences or the losses of Rutter, of Somerville, of Gray, and he's definitely got this team playing. They're very much behind him, and I think you'd find it difficult to find a Leeds fan right now who would say with their chest quite bravely that they don't want Farke as their manager right now. In the summer, that might be different, because there might be reservations over style of play, how that translates to the Premier League, wanting to dominate possession, wanting to dominate the ball, just might not be as pragmatic or practical in the top flight. But for right now, I don't think you could have many complaints as a Leeds supporter.
You touched upon it there, but were there concerns in the summer when you mentioned those high-profile players leaving the club for a lot of money as well? A little bit of a mini rebuild in the summer that Farke and the club have negated quite well. Did you expect Leeds to go on and do as well? The caveat to that being that they did spend some money as well, didn't they?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they spent 10 million on Joe Rodon. That's not in the gift of most Championship clubs. Let's not make any bones about that. That is aided greatly by parachute payments, by commercial deals, sponsorship, and filling the stadium every week, which obviously not every club has the benefit of. But what Farke has been able to do is he's helped spread the goals around, or rather, his players have helped him in that regard. Whereas last season there was seemingly, I mean, maybe this is revisionism, but there's seemingly a reliance on Somerville getting the ball to Somerville. He'll cut inside onto his right, and he'll bend one into the far corner. There were a number of occasions where that was the case, that won Leeds games in which they maybe weren't the best team, or it was a case of get the ball to Jorginho, he'll do some magic, he'll dribble past three players, set someone up. There was maybe a reliance on those two and a few others. But this season, you've got, Dan James is man of the moment right now. He's near enough 20 goal contributions. He's hit double figures for the season in goals in midweek, even though he was out for a little while injured. He's been excellent. Piroe again, 20 goal contribs, like you mentioned earlier. While he's not set the world on fire, which sounds bizarre, but he has been extremely reliable. You've got Manor Solomon, who's obviously on loan from Spurs. Again, a player that most Championship clubs wouldn't be able to afford to bring in for a season. But he's since coming into the team and getting settled, he's now putting up 7 goals, 7 assists, I think it is already. Even Brendan Aronson, he was someone who returned from a loan spell last season because didn't fancy playing in the Championship. Has now decided in the summer that he wanted to hike up his boots and say, you know what, I do fancy the Championship now. I want to give it a shot and write my name into Leeds folklore. I'm not sure whether he will be written into Leeds folklore, but this season again, he's the one who's been extremely reliable, particularly at home. 8 goals from him, which I think if you'd asked me or anybody else who follows Leeds either professionally or as a supporter, I think you would have said I doubt Brendan gets 8 goals at the sort of 2/3 mark of the season. So they've chipped in, they've spread the goals really nicely. Jayden Bogle's chipped in with a few from right back. Joe Rodon's got one. There's been a couple from Tanaka in the middle, who's been excellent and a real revelation. So they've really spread the load a lot more in terms of goal contributions. And if one of them doesn't get you, then another one will. And it's kind of the story with how Leeds play. If you're able to withstand the dominance that Leeds will have over the ball, and you actually then try and attack against them, they'll catch you on the counter. They've got the most fast break goals in the division. So it is a blessing for Daniel Farke that he does have quite a lot of talented players at his disposal.
You've touched upon it there in terms of the style of play and the numbers, and it's all very impressive, the level of play that Leeds have got. But how has Farke got a tune out of all of these players? And what would you say is Leeds' MO under Daniel Farke in terms of their playing style for somebody that maybe hasn't watched Leeds a lot over the first 2/3 of the season?
I'd say that the MO against poorer sides in particular is to dominate the ball and basically just exhaust the opposition, tire them out, get your rest in possession, and then they can turn it on at the click of a fingers. They have the ability to slide in Dan James in behind, and he's going to be quicker, he's going to be sharper than most fullbacks in this league, and certainly central defenders. They've got their press is quite good from the front. Aronson is key to that because he's so energetic. While he might not be turning the ball over loads, he is forcing players to make passes that maybe they don't want to make, that they're not able to break lines. They're not able to play forwards because they're being put under pressure. I'd say that the MO is certainly to be the protagonist in the game. Leeds want to put their stamp on things, or rather Farke wants his Leeds team to put their stamp on the game. But there has also been instances of individual quality, and they often show themselves in transition. Solomon and James on the wing since the turn of the year have both been excellent on the break. They've been very good in build-up as well, but I think that's kind of where they excel. Farke actually said at the in the post-match presser at Watford on Tuesday, sometimes reporters can suggest that Leeds are a very good at counter-attacking side, or that's a great counter-attacking goal, when in actual fact they didn't turn over possession. It was just a patient build-up followed by a quick, incisive final action. They are just they enjoy the ball. They're very good at protecting the ball. They don't give it away a lot, and as a result, they don't concede many goals.
And presumably, they would expect to dominate large parts of the game against Sunderland at home.
Yeah, I think that is the expectation. Sunderland obviously being one of the better sides in this division this season. I think there has to be an element of understanding that Sunderland will have spells in the game because they've got the players, they've got the rhythm and the continuity, and clearly the belief as well. But Leeds will still want to control things because that is what they've done at Elland Road all season. They've got the best home record in the league. and that's no coincidence. They have taken the game to opponents, and even when it's been wins by a single goal margin, they're not all 7-0 against Cardiff. They have had the lion's share of possession. They've had the lion's share of chances and shots, and good. They create good opportunities. It's why their XG is so high and so far above the other teams who've got good XG numbers this year.
I'm fascinated by this fixture. Obviously, Sunderland Leeds, I think in the Championship, there's always going to be box office, isn't it? Elland Road's a fantastic ground to go to. I love going there. The atmosphere is always tremendous. It's a big game. There's something on it. And just looking back to the game at the Stadium of Light, that's the first, well, I think it's the first and only team I've seen come to the Stadium of Light, and I've thought, wow, okay, they're really impressive. I think they're a couple of levels above us for periods. But I felt during that game as well, Sunderland really came into it and grew in confidence, and they had spells in that game. It was a real ding-dong battle. Obviously, Sunderland with a large slice of fortune to get the point. I think what's really interesting, Joe, is both teams have probably progressed since then, as you would expect, growing into a season. What worries me, though, is that I think Sunderland have only won by more than a one-goal margin a couple of times since October. We sort of tend to edge marginal games. We have beaten the likes of Sheffield United, but it's never by very much. I've always thought that we had it in us to maybe win by 4, 5, 6, but it hasn't happened. Whereas with Leeds, you mentioned the Cardiff result and a few others this season, they've got goals in that side, and that does concern me.
Yeah, I mean, the current run that they're on, so it's a 14-game unbeaten run in the league, but over the last 6, they haven't conceded, which again, is very Burnley-esque of them. But they've also scored 18 in that time without reply. And there's been 9 different scorers. So it's a case of, how do you, for opponents, it's a case of how do you stop this team? Because you've got 3 different scorers on 4 goals each, and then 5 separate, or 6, I think, separate scorers who've also got 1. And I think maybe only 1 or 2, maybe just the 1 has been a penalty. So, they do have many ways of finding a breakthrough. I do expect Sunderland to have a period or periods in this game on Monday night where Leeds are maybe under the cosh a little bit because of the quality that Sunderland do have in possession as well. I think Isidore is the type of forward that maybe Leeds haven't come up against too much this season. Obviously he's playing with great confidence at the moment. That the Burnley game aside, obviously, but Enzo Lefebvre as well, I think is somebody who is the type of player that Leeds rarely come up against in this division. So it'll be a very good acid test for if Leeds are destined for the Premier League. It'll be a very good acid test against certainly individuals for what they're going to come up against week in, week out next year. So they should be relishing this game. Let's test ourselves against one of the best teams in this division, and also it's a real opportunity to put some daylight between themselves and Sunderland, and that 3rd place spot.
Yeah, whereas from a Sunderland perspective, we're probably thinking a point or win. Otherwise, the top 2 might be beyond us. Caveat to that again, there's a lot of football to be played. I want to get your take, Joe, on the home crowd at Elland Road. I touched upon it there, but the passion is brilliant. They always turn out in the numbers. I think Leeds are one of the most fervent fan bases in the country. But when Sunderland came there last season, they set up to frustrate Leeds, and there was an expectation. And I distinctly remember that Elland Road crowd. There was a few grumblings. It wasn't Leeds' night. They missed chances. It perhaps didn't go the way that they wanted. And I thought, this crowd is maybe turning a little bit. Do you think there's the potential for that to happen with Leeds doing so well? Obviously, I think they're in a better position now than they were back then. How do you sort of judge that as a Leeds United reporter?
I think there's definitely been undercurrents throughout the past 2 years of, there's, I wouldn't say there's an expectation, because I don't think Leeds fans take it for granted that they win games and they win so regularly. I think there is an expectation, though, that they will be the protagonist in the game. And when they're not taking chances, it kind of comes back to the whole, it's very Leeds that, you've heard, the Premier League versions, probably it's very Spursy.
But we have a similar thing. Sunderland doing a Sunderland.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like every fan base kind of has that that belief or the leaning that, you know, our team or my team will always, you know, they'll throw in the towel at you know, X juncture or Y juncture because that's just who we are. That's you know, in our DNA. I think there's an undercurrent of that at Leeds, that, you know, they've had it rough for a long time in the past. So, you know, why would it be any different? The crowd is an interesting one, because if an away team like Sunderland did last year, they can come, they can set up and really frustrate. You know, they can feed on that lack of patience, and particularly when it's a young team like Leeds was last season, they maybe don't deal with the pressure from, you know, from the fans or outside in the same way that a more experienced team would, and kind of go about it in a more workmanlike fashion. I'd say this year Leeds are definitely more workmanlike. They're maybe less individually exciting, but they get the job done. I think with the crowd, it's probably one of the stadiums in English football where they are very much in the game and using them, either Leeds harnessing the energy to spur them on, or the opposition using the frustration to sort of embolden themselves and just, you know, remain resolute and or turn the home fans on the team. It's definitely one of those crowds which is tangible in a stadium rather than, I don't know, somewhere else where it's maybe a bit more of a tepid atmosphere.
No, I absolutely agree. Can we talk quickly about the goalkeeper as well, Meslier, because he had that howler against Sunderland earlier on in the season, and I remember him coming in for a lot of stick from Leeds fans and just football fans in general. Daniel Farke stuck with him, didn't he? And you know, there was a lot of speculation that he wouldn't. How have Leeds fans been with him? How's he been since that? Because there was, of course, as well the photo that circulated on social media with him with our manager Regis Lebris after the game, and they were sort of sharing a smile. I felt a bit sorry for him, really. You know, they did know each other, and he did get a bit of a pile on, but it was such a weird freak goal as well. And I think if you slow it down frame by frame, and it's perhaps he should have reacted better, but it does get the weirdest of bobbles. It is like a 1 in a million goal. It's so strange, and I felt for him in the aftermath, to be honest.
You could describe it as like a Darren Bent beach ball moment, couldn't you?
It was
so
like
bizarre.
Breathtaking. Yeah, it was strange, very strange.
So odd. And I mean, there's a concern among some Leeds fans that maybe Meslier is not it for the Premier League. I think he's showed in recent weeks that he can be a very good shot stopper. There was an incident, or rather there was the game at Hull at the beginning of this year where Leeds were 3-1 up, they were cruising, and maybe Meslier was at fault for the final goal. And you could argue that he was at fault in some way for all three of the concessions that day. But Farke stood by him. He was saying today that, you know, one of the things is you just got to get back out onto the training pitch. You've got to work hard. I mean, the view for a lot of people is that Leeds would need a new goalkeeper in the summer. I'm not so sure that. I mean, it's difficult to say because you don't know if Leeds are going to go up, if they're going to stay, and then how that affects players' individual circumstances. But, you know, Meslier has had, to my mind, one very good season, and a few passable ones. I'd put last year, even though he got so many clean sheets, I'd say it was passable because he was not really put under that much pressure. I'd say the same for this season. You know, he's not been subjected to the number of shots that, you know, a Victor Johansson at Stoke, for example, has been, and he's been excellent. But in recent weeks, I mean, at Watford, he kept Leeds in the game, kept Leeds in front from a good Moussa Sissoko shot. I think it was at 1-0 or maybe 2-0. But yeah, he's out of the starting 11. He's probably one of the few that Leeds fans are maybe not entirely sold on, because they've seen the evidence over the past 4 or 5 years that he's been number one, that he does have that maybe not as glaring an error in him as the Sunderland one. But there have been just a few concerns and a few that's kind of spring to mind.
Absolutely. Right, predictions before we tail off, because I know you've got to get away and do some stuff. How do you think you'll feel come the end of the game? I'll go first, to be honest. You've worried me by what you've said. I knew Leeds were a good side, but having listened to yourself and that underlying confidence, I think I'd be happy with a point, to be honest. An optimistic point, that's my prediction.
I don't think a point is a bad result for Leeds either. I think the most important thing for them over the next 2 games, being Sunderland and Sheffield United, is that you don't lose any ground. I think it's a case of what Leeds have done since they went top is just kept teams at arm's length. They've traded places with Sheffield United on occasion, but that's been due to fixture scheduling where one team leapfrogs because they played a game more and whatnot. But I think Leeds will be favourites for it, obviously. But this is definitely a game in which they won't have it all their own way, which has not been the case recently. I know they went to Coventry and played really well there against a team that had won their last 4. I think Cardiff were like 7 games unbeaten before they came to Elland Road. But I think Sunderland are a different entity, and you can see that in the points tally in the Championship table. There is a top 4, and then there's the rest, and Sunderland are very much in that. So I think there will. I don't anticipate there being loads of goals, because I think Sunderland have to be pragmatic and acknowledge that if they go hammer and tongs with Leeds and try and match them from an attacking standpoint, they will concede. But I do think this is 2 really, really well matched teams going at each other. So I think it'll be narrow, but I think I'm going to go Leeds with a 1-0.
Oh, very, very good. It's an interesting game, a fascinating game. I'm really looking forward to it. Joe, thanks for joining me. Tell the listeners where they can find your work ahead of the game if they'd like to read a bit more on Leeds United.
Yeah, anything that you'd like to be kept abreast of on Leeds, I'm on X, Blue Sky at Joe Donnohue, DONNOHUE is the spelling of my surname. But yeah, pretty much there, or just go on to the Yorkshire Evening Post website. And I'm sure under the Leeds United section, there'll be something that myself and my colleagues have written, which will be hopefully instructive and informative before the game on Monday.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Joe. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the Raw podcast. You can head over to the Sunderland Echo website for all of your Sunderland-focused content ahead of the game against Leeds United on Monday. Thanks once again for tuning